collecting data and analyzing it all was phenomenal. It really professionalized the teachers. They felt valued. They didn't feel like we were looking in on them during their PLC and telling them, oh, now wait, you haven't done your, make sure you unpack that tech first and then do this and then do this. So they really took ownership of it and they did it. And so we're trying to push the implementation this year to other grade levels, but it's at the beginning of the year and they're kind of saying, whoa, what are you telling me? So I think I'm going to wait another week or two.
Okay. Timing is everything.
Right? So anyway, they're doing, the people who did it last year are continuing it, like that cycle of thinking. And so I'm trying to kind of talk the others down from the ledge of like, no, you don't have, we're not going to upload to the portal, we're not going to write a proposal, we're not going to do all that stuff. We're going to take the principles out of it and then go from there. Now, if we were to have help and somebody from outside came in and helped us, then absolutely I'd be happy to do the portal stuff again. I think it was, that formalized aspect was really neat and really brought a lot to it. But just piecing together a little bit of an instructional coach here and then a team there and myself and the AP, like we just can't go to the depth of writing the big, huge proposal and all of that stuff. So.
And I want to just really praise Lacey and Patty. Both of them made the work successful in this district. They cleared the path and created the right conditions for learning for the teachers to have success. It's an incredibly, incredibly intense, cognitively demanding process. And just like we would position learners for success, this work demands that we think through ways to position teachers for the kinds of success that they need. And Patty and Lacey did extraordinary jobs last year of carving out time and creating the pathways for that success. So I cannot applaud you both enough for the work that you did, because the state this is year 2 of the pilot project, and so they are looking for scalable ways to make this doable in districts. But it's a journey and it's an experiment, let's just be honest, right? Like they're in the process of thinking about how do we make this a scalable thing, and Denton ISD gets to be part of that process. Our state lead is Blair Clausen, and she is very invested in how you guys can think about how to move it forward. So thank you both very much. We'll continue with introduction.
I would say
Kudos. And of course Dr. Perkins as well.
I just, those are amazing things. It was.
Oh, Fred Young, I'm the associate principal here at Bryan High School, and it's been a good part of my life working with professional development with teachers. I have a little bit of experience with that, so anyway, glad to be here. Glad to have you.
I'm Sean Ziegler. I'm the department head for English. This is my 19th year, I think, on this campus in education. And like Trey, I'm here because I was asked. We'll see what's going on. This all sounds interesting and new.
All right. We're glad you're right.
I'm Jeff Russell, area superintendent, and Gwen and I have talked about possibly taking this in our zone too. I got intrigued by y'all's presentation at the board meeting last year. Thought you did a great job of highlighting this. Kind of got me excited about it. I guess because I like to focus on the standards and breaking those down. I think anytime teachers can do that together, kids benefit from that. Also, Lauren's here, and I would say, the success that we had at Decatur had a lot to do with her ability to kind of break down ELA standards for our kids. And I think it had a benefit to us across the board. I think if you were going to do this on a secondary level, there's probably nobody better to do that than Lauren. She's maybe in the top 1% of the teachers I've ever come in contact with. So.
Yay, good.
No pressure, Lauren.
That's right. And I don't think Jeff mentioned he's over the Braswell zone.
Okay.
So.
Are we on TV?
Yes, just so you know, and I told Dr. Perkins,
She did tell me that. I'm sorry.
This happens regularly, by the way, in the meetings. I had to last year often when we were with the teachers have recording going on. Most of it was for my own professional growth. I had a director and a person who was really trying to help grow my facilitator skills. And so, but today we're actually recording it because Blair Clausen, the lead of the project, is really, truly interested in scaling this work in districts. And so she could not be at this meeting via Zoom, so she said, could I record it? And we have a meeting with her at 2 o'clock this afternoon to visit with her about systems that you guys can create to help scale the work and just barriers for the work and things like that. So please tell us about you.
Okay. So I'm Gwen Perkins, and I'm one of the 4 area superintendents for academic programs, and it's really a blessing to work with the Ryan Zone, and I had an opportunity to drop in a couple of times when Patty's team was planning, and to be a fly on the wall literally and try to keep my mouth shut and not get involved in their planning, because it was so exciting to listen to that level of conversation and planning and data analysis. But then the research that they were bringing to the table about what would be the best research-based strategy to address this particular standard or this fundamental piece of the lesson. So I had that piece, and then I got to go to Pecan Creek and watch someone model the lesson with a room full of people gathering data, and then listen to the delivery and the feedback back to that teacher. And it was emotional, and I mean that literally. If you were in that room, Tennille, you were. It was really emotional for that teacher, the value that she had for the feedback that she received from her peers who had planned alongside her, set her up, encouraged her, believed in her, and then gave her this feedback. And then those teachers, based on what they had observed, went out and taught the lesson again. So Trey and Fred and Sean, the reason that you're here is I really believe in the power of the Texas Lesson Study. Not even being in it as deep as Dr. Rainey and Dr. Jensen, I just can't imagine doing things differently. And I think it would be a powerful piece for the Ryan Zone as we focus on literacy to really explore this opportunity at the middle school level and the high school level. So that's why you're here, Trey, Sean, Fred.
I'll
and
do
then
whatever you tell me.
I love you, Trey. That's why I love you. And then Fred, just recently, he defended his dissertation, which was the impact of professional development. And so his expertise in professional learning and what he does here at Ryan is unbelievable. So and then Chris is interested in possibly implementing this at her campus. And she's right beside Myers, which makes a really good pair for them to support one another in this work if she decides to move forward.
So I have to definitely brag on Dr. Perkins as well, because your investment and involvement last year is something that we had not seen across the state. So with the project getting started, we as facilitators from the ESC were just sent in to find a school, get started, right? But when the state began to say, how can we make this a sustainable long-term thing where ultimately they're going to walk their way out of it, then we have to figure out this. And just so you guys are clear, lesson study is intended to be kind of a grassroots thing. So you get a group of educators who are passionate about solving a common problem of practice, and they just get together on their own time and they do this deep, hard thing. And maybe they, in Japan, where it's become, it's their only form of professional development, truly, it's part of their culture. It's a cultural experience, and teaching is a cultural experience. But with that being said, when the state is rolling it out, where they're trying to figure out how do we get systems from the top and that grassroots thing to kind of meet in the middle. So that's why we're all here together, because you are part of helping move systems. You're all in positions of leadership to help those systems occur. And one of the things that I really bragged on you guys about was that your approach of let's start in one zone and get it to ripple a little there. And then once that zone has kind of some roots in it, then it can spread to the next zone and the next zone. So many of our districts across the state that are involved, so all of our ESCs have lesson study growing slowly in all rural places, urban places, suburban places. But Commissioner Morath, this is very much his pet project. He is very, very, very passionate. He read The Teaching Gap and it intrigued him. So let's just kind of look at that for just a second. This is kind of our agenda. We'll go through it quickly. We do have some outcomes and next steps, but I'm going to fly fast through this so we honor your time. We do hope to leave here with established groups for next year, and we hope that we can choose an initial date for the training. Our hope is also to help you guys think about a plan for gateway publication and videography, long-term lesson study implementation. What's that going to look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, because it's a long-haul journey. And then considering systems for scaling the work. You guys are going to help us brainstorm and be guinea pigs in that. So thanks. Take a second to just absorb this quote for a moment, if you can read it from where you're at. What stands out to you? Tell me what's resonating, what's challenging, confirming what you already believe, or challenging you a little bit.
Well, I would certainly say I would agree with improving one lesson at a time. I think we all want starting place to see something that's measurable and have incremental change.
Incremental change. I thought that word definitely popped out. That small cumulative improvement over time. What else?
Thinking big.
Thinking big.
I think we do overthink a lot of things, and sometimes need to slow it down and look at what's best practice. It doesn't always have to be some grand idea or program or something on a different scale. It can be simple things.
Yeah. I was drawn to lesson study because it is simple. I mean, certainly scaling it, we have to get some complex systems in place. But the idea that we're going to do this a little at a time, one lesson at a time, it isn't flashy though, right? He says that in there. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic. We need improvement right now. We can't wait 10 years. How's that working for us?
Well, and I think the last sentence, where I think that we all, going back to Trey's point, we bite off so much and we end up being mediocre in those processes rather than really refining and narrowing the scope of our work, which is, for the lesson study, the process. Just the process of learning together. And in the beginning of the year conferences, we've had conversations about how do we make our teachers feel empowered. Watching that board meeting, watching the outcome of the lesson study at Pecan Creek, watching the process work at Hodge, honoring the level of professionalism that our teachers bring to the table. It gives you goosebumps, and I know that sounds goofy, but I also gave a board presentation where I said amen. But
really
it's about
is
the importance of the teacher, and this honors the importance of the teacher and their expertise.
Well, and I think that, I sat in the PLC on Tuesday, and at the end of it, I kind of looked at someone else and said, I just don't feel like that was good. Some of the teachers might have left feeling, well, we mapped out our next 9 weeks of goals or whatever, and they did, but they just didn't go deep on any one thing. And that was what I loved about lesson study, is they still have to map out and pace themselves up so that they know that our kids will be ready to benefit from this lesson by November 1st, if that's when we're going to teach that lesson. But it was all like, what do I need to make sure we're doing in order to get our students ready for whatever this is. And the lessons at Hodge were, the final teaches were good. There was nothing flashy about them, but they were good. They just weren't great. But the thinking that went behind them, and truly the students learned from them. They were not these beautiful high-tech lessons where they're just, there was no dog and pony show whatsoever. It was funny that you said emotional. Almost every teacher cried after their lesson. They'd get back in and everybody was telling them how great it was, and they'd sit there and they'd cry. I think it was relief and joy. Sometimes.
Well, you have to realize there's all these extra adults in the room, and there's video cameras rolling, so there's an intensity around it that there is a relief sense. But I want to piggyback on what you said, that the student learning outcomes take center stage. What did kids learn? Which ones got it? Which ones didn't? And what instructional moves did we make that made it happen or didn't make it happen? And it's such a myopic, narrowed, zoned in focus that there is some resistance to this idea of what? You're going to spend a whole semester working on one thing. One thing that gives, how often do our teachers, you talked about that, I would argue being a Denton teacher and even in other districts that I've worked in, there's a real thing happening in education called initiative fatigue. Yes, are we all feeling it? And so bringing this in and thinking about how you can make it scalable and long term, I think I'm drawn to lesson study because it can be perceived as one more thing. I'm not going to sugarcoat that because it's additional work. But how do you make that part of your culture, and how do you walk into the work going, it isn't a new initiative. This is something the Japanese have done for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a common part of their culture. And I think that I hear you guys saying we want to make this part of our culture in Denton ISD. We want those rigorous professional conversations. We want that really reflective piece of teaching and learning. So this is, if you're not familiar with it, this is the new Every Student Succeeds Act's definition of professional development. You have it in your folder if you need an up-close view. I think it's the first thing in there. Take a second and just look at that definition and think about professional development you're offering in Denton ISD currently and what parts of it are honored in this definition and where lesson study could fit, particularly those of you who have lived it. What stands out to you in this? This is truly how it is defined by the law. And have you ever seen this definition?
I think all those things are in Texas Lesson Study, and yeah, there's not a single thing there that's not part of the lesson study. And again, I mean, I think it goes back to seeing the power of all these teachers sitting there saying, but did that pair work that you did, how many of the students were actually engaged during that pair work? And somebody else was like, actually it was 23%, or you know, whatever it is. They rattled it off.
5 tables in the room actually did what we needed them to do.
Yeah,
Yes.
or whatever it might be. And so it's, I mean, data-driven in a different sense. It's not data-driven in, like I talked about this with Gwen before, that yes, I can get a kid to pass the STAR in a number of ways. I can throw worksheets at them all day long, and they would pass it, most kids. And so some people call that data-driven, and they say, yeah, we're getting results, it's working. But it's not data-driven in the sense that you're not seeing, so what effect did that have on the students? Like, were they engaged? Did they become learners as an effect of filling out those worksheets all day long?
I would offer that every teacher I got to be privileged to serve last year had an expanded definition of data. When the process was over, it wasn't just the results on a worksheet, it wasn't just the results on a pre and post assessment. Their definition of data was expanded in profound ways through instruction. Not, a lot of our PLC time is spent data disaggregation, looking at how kids did on a CBA or whatever it may be, but this is a very bigger thing. Any other words on there that stand out to you?
I'm going to say the collaborative piece, and before we scared Chris and Trey and especially Sean off, the emotional piece I think comes from investing yourself so much into that lesson. And to your point about the data-driven piece and looking at it differently, what they identified were what's the big unit that we want to focus on, but then really looking at the data in such a way that that unit was defined based on the specific needs of each child and where they could build those fundamental pieces in. And they only determined that by really digging into the data in a different way, not just saying, hey, we want to increase our 4th grade reading performance by 20% and just boom, let's go at it. It was really digging deep into and being intentional about each student's point and place and time and what could we give to them. So, and then that collaboration piece made it emotional. So not to scare you away, Sean. But when you're investing that much of yourself and your passion and your purpose into learning, and you're really owning that learning, it does become emotional, and you've become a team that